I just want to quickly give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about. I'm first going to give you some background on our office. Our office is really a brand new office. Historically, the university has had maybe a third of an FTE devoted to university privacy functions, and now we have roughly six, 7 people who support this office. So there's been a real ramp up in devotion of resources. So I'm also going to talk about privacy issues affecting universities, some of the laws and regulations, privacy breaches, give you a taste of what the environment looks like in terms of colleges and universities across the country and types of breaches that they experience. I'll talk to you a little bit about what you should do if you expect that a breach has occurred that you come across during your daily lives. I'll talk to you about the data lifecycle, contracts with third parties, and what you can expect from our office in terms of resources and support for your functions. Okay. Thank you. So here's a quick org chart. You can see we have lots of great employees. Catherine, who's our privacy program manager, who supports primarily School of Medicine and research and our covered entity medical HIPAA-related portion. We have Deanna Tyler, who's starting next Monday, who will be the person, your point person for support for the privacy issues that you encounter. She will support essentially the rest of the university, covering FERPA, employee data, and those sorts of things. And then we have a privacy risk manager, a training manager, and a specialist in our office. Again, like I said, in the last year, we've really grown tremendously. And I think we offer some great resources that I hope you'll take advantage of. Here's an awesome pinwheel kind of chart that we developed. Actually, I stole it from one of Catherine's prior presentations. But you can see we've got lots of support that we provide in lots of different areas. And aside from the technical and medical and training area, the part that I think that falls within this group here is the academic schools, the trainings that we provide, and I'll talk to you a little bit about FERPA training that we hope to roll out. And in terms of protection of data, our protections and scope really encompasses employee data, medical data, and student data as well. So let's talk a little bit about what universities across the country are looking at. So there's really a real uptick, a noticeable uptick in state and federal scrutiny on the protection of data that really doesn't exempt universities. There's been a lot of action in enforcement against universities for failing to protect student data, employee data, and in an academic medical center, data of patients. There's increasing threats. We have computers, laptops, all kinds of systems, and the stuff's complicated. It's not easy, and we don't expect you all to be experts in privacy. That's why we're here as a resource. So if you could just spot the issues, really, I think that's a huge advantage in ensuring that we're doing what we're supposed to do in order to protect data. We have encryption that is an excellent safe harbor, and I know that Michael and his team have done a tremendous amount in fostering an encryption program for our computing system here. We're decentralized, and it's really difficult to even figure out who to call often. So we hope to provide a centralized resource for you for those kinds of questions. We partner quite a bit. I see Michael and his team really quite often, sometimes too much, but he's a good guy, so it works out well. There's been a lack of specialized resources. Really, like I said, a third of an FTE devoted to this function. Now we have 7 people in our office. So it's really encouraging that Stanford has recognized the need for these sorts of services. And then really there's an increased expectations from the public for universities like Stanford to protect the data that we're collecting and maintaining and storing and disclosing to appropriate third parties. The recognition, especially in this area, I've talked to a number of people who've lodged complaints, had questions, who really get it and understand the nature of what we do and our obligation to protect data, whether it be student data, employee data, as I said, the other data that we collect and store as part of our mission. So the enforcement environment really spans across state and federal lines. I won't go into detail here. FERPA is certainly a major concern. There's consumer protection laws. There's a California breach notification law that requires us to notify affected individuals in the event of certain breaches. Particularly in your case, it would include both student and employee data. And I won't go, we don't have a whole lot of time here to walk through what that looks like, but I'll give you some guidelines on how to approach it if you, in both recognizing what a student data breach might look like and how to respond to it if you're concerned. So higher education itself has been notoriously deficient in providing protections for the classes of data that they collect. This is just the reported breaches that's available on Privacy Rights website. And over 14 million records have been impacted by these sorts of breaches over the last decade. And again, these are just the reported ones. And there's no university or college or education system that's exempt from this. There's smatterings of Ivy League schools, Cornell, Brown, Penn, all the way down to local community colleges. And so I think we're really trying to superimpose a framework and retrofit what's been established in our area to protect data, where we've really fostered an environment that hasn't really focused on the protection of data necessarily. So it's a difficult job. You can see here's just, again, this is just a brief handful of examples of the kinds of breaches that we've seen. Everything from cyber attacks to issues related to technical controls, failure of technical controls, down to the most recent one here, which I think was just a month or two old, where it involves a laptop that was stolen, lost stolen device containing sensitive information on personnel. Not all that uncommon. These kinds of things happen all the time. So here's some examples of the types of incidents that should raise your eyebrows and sort of perk you up when you experience any one of these sorts of events that occur. Certainly lost computing device, an unencrypted device that you use to store or access student data or sensitive employee data, paper documents lost or stolen, misdirected faxes or emails. I don't know if anyone still faxes, but you certainly email, and you may be caught with the same affliction that I have, where I run through, put someone's name in, and it auto-populates someone else's name in there, and I end up sending an email that I really wish I hadn't sent to this person. Those kinds of things happen.
Or another instance would be if you put, if you're sending out an email to a lot of people and you only want one person to see it, you don't want the list of recipients to be able to view who else is on there, and you fail to BCC, because email addresses, that's PII, that's personal identifying information. So the email addresses are protected as well, especially when it's either employee or student data.
Right. We've had instances where someone had meant to send out an email to a BCC group and sent it out instead to the BCC to the TO group, and that by itself was a disclosure, because anyone who received the email saw the other 100 people who were on that email list, and they now know that they're part of, whether it's a research study or a certain student group, that they really weren't intended to know. In any event, so there's lots of areas where you might suspect that there's been a loss of data, an unauthorized disclosure. When those sorts of things occur, here are the steps that we'd like you to take. And again, I'm sort of giving you a high-gloss overview. And really, as I said, you're not intended to be considered experts in this area. But if you could spot some of those issues, when you recognize that, hey, maybe this information was inappropriately disclosed, might not be, but here's what we recommend you do. Report it to our office. Provide a summary. We'll have a form on the website that you can complete indicating exactly what happened, the people involved, the nature of the incident.
And we should actually interject, we currently do have a form that's available on privacy.stanford.edu for lost and stolen devices. We're going to expand that into your incidental email disclosure or your faxes to make it broader, but for right now we do have that resource. So if you have a lost or stolen device, we'd recommend you fill out that form, or you can contact either one of us directly.
And so Catherine handles a lot of these sorts of incidents. So tell us what it looks like when you get an incident. What are some of the steps that you do? So
typically if we get a lost or stolen device, the first thing that we want to do, we talked about encryption sort of being the gold standard. We want to check the systems if it's a mobile device or a laptop, and I'm sure that the Information Security Office can talk a little bit about that. We check to make sure those devices are encrypted, and we, depending on who, sometimes people don't fill out the form so great, but we like to talk to people anyway. So we'll get on the phone and and talk to you about, okay, what happened? You're not in trouble. It's a good thing that you reported. Now give me all of the information that you can about the data that was involved, because we really want to know what kind of data was at issue. Was it student data? Was it employee data? In my instance, was it health information? Because that brings into play a whole different set of federal and state statutes. And as David noted, there's both state and federal breach notification requirements. And so we need to sort of be able to isolate those. And then obviously we want to mitigate it. So if you sent out the email, did you talk to the person about did they delete it, the recipient? And if you didn't, that's fine. Our office will take care of that, and we'll contact the person. We get these happen a lot, the misdirected faxes, and so we have to get an attestation from the person to make sure that they destroyed whatever sensitive information may have inadvertently gotten out. And then we'll work with your team or whoever in your office to develop a corrective action plan. Like, why did this happen? Are there better approaches? Maybe we shouldn't be faxing, because that seems to be a common area of data leakage. And then we'll determine if notification, like we talked about the breach notification laws, if it rises to the level of a reportable breach, then our office will work with your offices and members of your teams to determine what the letter should say and who needs to be notified.
And so before I talk about the slide, I would like to mention that we're really, we presented at a conference last week, and someone said, oh, you're from the privacy office, we're afraid of you. And I sort of want to dispel that notion. Yeah. We're not running around with hauling people off to our privacy jail at the basement.
Well, David does, I don't, so.
Typically, those are all School of Medicine employees.
Right,
so
yeah.
You should be immune from that. But I'll mention again, there really hasn't been historical support at a university level for this sort of function. So I really want to help people understand what their obligations are, and sort of like we're from the government, we're here to help. That's the approach that I think that we're taking with the privacy office. And so these kinds of things, these human error kinds of mistakes, are certainly understandable, and we hope to be able to at least assist you in becoming compliant when those kinds of things happen. And
remediating it too, like we talked about. Why was there a training, a lack of training on our office's part? Can we come in and do a training about better practices? So, this is just the data life cycle, so we talk about it, and this is important to note that you often think about, oh, transmission, so releasing student data, that's a common area, but from collection to storage to use to releasing to third parties to other institutions with respect to FERPA, to archiving and destruction, there's various points in the data life cycle where data can leak out, and so just be aware that it's not just one area like data collection or data transmission. It can be any of those stages.
So I'll just talk briefly. There's a new contracting process that's going to be reflected in the requisition form. Previously, if the contract was under a dollar amount, $25,000, you could just bump right over to a purchase order. We are going to, and it should be in place very soon if it's not already, implement a series of fields, so that if the third party you're working with is going to be handling confidential data, student data, then you would check that box, and a contract would be required. And you wouldn't be allowed to go to purchase order. And the reason is because we want to make sure we're holding that vendor to certain privacy and security standards that are reflected in the contract.
And just to interject, the terms prohibited, restricted, and confidential data are based on the university's data classification system. And I think Michael's going to talk a little bit about that.
So quickly to close up here, to try and keep respectful of the time. So we have a new privacy office website that we're developing. As I said, we're really a brand new office, and we hope to offer this resource here fairly soon. We're going to be offering FERPA training standardized across the university. An online training, we'll be working with the various constituents throughout the university to sort of grab everyone in together in a room and get buy-in from all the stakeholders on appropriate university FERPA training and standardize it really for everybody. We hope to offer, at least initially, a different training for student services personnel, and then a separate one for faculty, because they really have different concerns than what the student services do. We hope to have a whole set of student and FERPA-based policies on our website. I really would love to get a privacy forum together to discuss these sorts of issues on a regular basis. We'd even invite our good friends Michael and his group to present. I think there's a lot of security and privacy initiatives that really go hand in hand to foster the kind of environment that we're looking for to protect data. And then obviously we have incident and breach investigations. And here, Catherine's pulling me on the time here. And so here's some contact information. So we'd be happy to stay around afterwards and answer any questions you have.